Bench Opinions. Three idiots with amateur analysis.
Welcome to another episode of Bench Opinions, everyone. I'm joined by my usual suspects, Dominic and Klaus.
Hello.
What a weekend of rugby we've had.
This is true.
Speaking strictly about the URC game that happened on Saturday morning. No, I think probably one of the greatest Saturdays for rugby that we've seen in a long time. We had the argument whether the Six Nations was the greatest tournament in international rugby recently. I know we were in disagreement on this couch here. That really served up a few classics though. Even though some scorelines weren't tight, it was good rugby all round. You look pessimistic at best.
No, I think I'm blown away actually by the way the Six Nations has panned out. I think, you can also see it by the results. Obviously, no one sort of going home winning the Grand Slam, but also some teams getting results that you maybe didn't expect. I think also just the scoreline, particularly, I think the game that sums it up perfectly is that scoreline between France and England.
Yeah.
Super high scoring, generally actually throughout the tournament, quite high scoring, and just a lot of jeopardy. France should have never let that get that close. They shouldn't have lost to Scotland on paper. England should have been in the running. Italy should never have beaten Italy or Scotland. Like all of these should have not, but they all happened. So obviously,
And going into the final weekend, you got three teams who can possibly win it. And then, obviously previous results had then limited that to two possible teams. I would argue Ireland not being one of the teams that anybody would have picked necessarily at the beginning of the tournament, but then really sort of coming into their own. And then on top of that, the entire tournament is decided 3 minutes after regular play by a penalty kick.
Yeah.
And not necessarily an easy one for Thomas Ramos, of course, an easy one because that guy seems to just slot everything. But for the normal sort of humans that walk amongst us, that's not an easy kick.
No. We'll get into that a little bit later. Let's start with the first game of the weekend. Scotland had a chance to put some pressure on France, and on the other side of the coin, Ireland had a chance which they took to put their name in the hat. They beat Scotland 43-21. I think the scoreline probably flatters Ireland a little bit, just because Scotland were definitely in it for a lot longer than that scoreline suggests. Seems like lack of chance taking for Scotland was the talk of the day here.
I think very often we had spoken about Scotland needing to come out hot and then sort of maintain that trajectory and keep the foot on the throttle, if you want to say it like that. But that's actually what Ireland did, right? They came in to the game scoring 2 tries within, I think, 10 minutes, something like that. And then, there was an equalizer from Scotland and whatnot, but Ireland really set the tone and Scotland were struggling to sort of match the pace. I think it's also just testament to Ireland and how they've progressed with Crowley at fly half. I was watching a podcast earlier where the guys were saying, like, let's not talk about 10s in the Ireland sort of setup, but you can't really ignore it. Since Crowley's come in, the team has just been a different beast, and that means that everybody around him is starting to play according to that style. And one of the guys who's really sort of put his hand up is McCloskey, and the combination between the two of them, I think they've really sort of set the tone for that team.
I think he makes a lot of people's tournament 15.
100%. Yeah.
I think there was a stat, and it wasn't necessarily late in the game, but there was a stat that I think Ireland had double the amount of points per 22 entry than Scotland did, which I think is testament to sort of, taking your chances, making sure that once you do put pressure on the opposition, you come away with some sort of points, whether it's 3 or 5 or 7.
Yeah, I think the Scotland performance unfortunately confirms exactly what our thoughts are about Gregor Townsend as well, because
we gave him 1 week of respite, and we're back.
That's the thing, though. I think we a lot of us were scratching our heads as to like, where's this resurgence come from? And we pinpointed the fact that it's actually just players putting their hands up and going out and taking the game by the scruff of the neck. But if you looked at Scotland in those, particularly the first 30, I'd say the whole of the first half, they had large portions of possession, and they did seem out of ideas, and they did seem like a relatively poorly coached team. And another reason I would say that they're not that well coached is that every time they sort of got a foothold back in the game, they succumb to another Irish try straight off the back of that, which for me lacks sort of lack sort of the cornerstones of a team where you go, okay, well, this is how we're going to respond to scoring our tries ourselves. We got hit early, we managed to respond and get back. There was a lack of control, and it did seem like their default setting was get Finn Russell the ball, which is at most times a very good idea. But if he's not unlocking the Irish, it seemed like the Irish just stood up and they didn't really have too many issues with that Scottish attack.
Yeah. I mean, listen, we can't also take for granted how difficult it is to beat Ireland in Ireland. They are one of the best teams in the world when they're on song, and definitely when they're at home. So I think it was a long shot for Scotland to beat Ireland away, and they grew into the role of possible tournament champions. No one really thought that they should be there. I mean, none of us would have predicted that by the final weekend they're in it with a chance to win it. So I think if we look at it holistically, one probably has to say they had a really good tournament, and it's just a step too far for them. The question is, will it ever not be a step too far for them?
Scotland's story is very similar to Italy's story in the sense that they were having so much success that, with that success and expectation starts arising from your fans or even just from neutrals like ourselves, where it's like, oh, well, they've beaten England, so yeah, they could go ahead and they could beat Ireland. And I think that's also a pressure that builds within the team. Yeah. And psychologically, you then go down to Dublin, and then, you get faced with a foe that's pretty formidable.
To be fair, though, I mean, large portions of this narrative of them trying to win the Six Nations was coming out of the Scottish camp as well, which is fair play to them. But they were talking leading up to the game that we realize this is our chance to win the Six Nations. And so I think in that sense, that's the angle that I see it from, is that they obviously had laid themselves this target after getting into that position to do it. And you have to just be honest that Ireland pretty easily saw them off, I would argue.
I think it's a really fine line between sort of us being super pessimistic about them a few weeks ago to now looking at them and being like, listen, to be fair to them, they had a good crack at it and they fell short. But I mean, fixtures maybe fell their way in the early part and didn't fall their way in the end. I mean, I don't know. I don't look at it too critically. I'm intrigued to see how they do in the Nation Series in the summer. But I mean, you're right. We could be sitting here in a half a year and it could be like they've beaten one good team and they've lost to two average teams and they're just back to square one.
What's your view on Gregor Townsend now after this performance?
I just think it's too close to the World Cup for them to change anything. There's no real people putting their hand up that are currently not in contract with any unions, so might as well stick with him and go through. The way that the World Cup is now set up, you've got so many tune-up games to get into the meat of the competition that they could, if they get to the round of 16 and then quarterfinal, having played not too many big opponents, who knows? They could be world beaters and have one or two big games in them, and suddenly they're sitting in a Rugby World Cup semi-final.
Yeah, and you said it earlier on. I think the win against England and then obviously the win against France bought him at the time. That was it. Yeah. That sealed his deal. That sealed his ticket to the World Cup, I think.
Yeah. Anything more on this game or any of the Irish players? I thought Dan Sheehan had a really good tournament as well, and he had a really good game against Scotland. That scrum really stood up and made themselves known.
And hats off to Furlong as well, because he struggled to find his feet early on in the tournament and had a fantastic game. Yeah. I found in the scrum, but also just in and around the ruck area. So congratulations to him.
And I think on the other side for Scotland, I did think Carl Steyn had a very good tournament all round. He's not necessarily the most elusive winger, but he sort of balances nicely between just pure pace and a little bit of flair.
He's also got a great skill set.
I think he's carrying hard.
Yeah, great under the high. He can do everything pretty well. Yeah. I don't think he's good under the high ball. He's a good tackler. He can be slippery at times, but he's not necessarily a Cheslin Colby. I think he's
Darcy Graham on the other side was quite elusive and was really really dodging and slipping a few tackles. So I wonder if that's something you're going to see more out of him, because it seems in the past seems like he's always been given the ball on the line without much room to maneuver.
And also for Scotland, you got to talk about Finn Russell. Maybe the scoreline doesn't show it, but he's had a fantastic tournament as well.
And Ben White. Okay. Enough
all of them. Fantastic. Well done. Yeah. Well done.
As Roy Keane would say, or as he would joke, no, he's a good lad. All right. Next game of the competition was Wales versus Italy. I believe I called it last week sitting on the couch here, and I think Dominic did as well.
I would have you say that I called it from the first week of this tournament.
Right.
We've got a prediction sort of fantasy game going on, and I was pretty comfortably in the lead until this weekend's fixtures, and I went with Italy beating Wales. I went with Scotland beating.
Oh, you went with your heart, hey?
I went with what I thought was right.
Oh, wow.
And
you got pimped at the post.
And I got pimped at the post. But at the same time, it was kind of a win-win because seeing Wales win again is very, very good for rugby and also just a joy to watch.
They beat Italy 31-17. Following this game sort of seemed like they were never really in danger of losing because they got ahead quite early. The first time they've won in the Six Nations in a long time. I think it was 3 years or something like that, or even longer. So really good for them. I think all in all, for both teams, a really good Six Nations.
Yeah. No, sorry. I was just trying to think about it because Wales only won once. But I guess, as the tournament progressed, Wales started getting better and better, right? So that trajectory was positive, and then actually going on and sort of finalizing with a win, and not even a win against the second worst team, a win against the fourth placed team.
Yeah.
Who have been on really good form until this game, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it wasn't just that they beat a team. It's also how they went about winning it, and I guess we'll talk about it when we talk about the England game. It's also how they lost it, right? That was impressive, and not necessarily the fact that they lost it. So to Wales, good job, congrats.
I think it's two sides of the same coin with this game in the sense that maybe this leaves an unnecessarily bitter taste in the mouth of Italy. On the same time, I think it does this crown maybe over crowns the Six Nations for Wales, or if anything, at least leaves them with a much sweeter taste, even sweeter than I think maybe they deserve. But I think Italy struggling away from home. They've lost. They had 5 games, 3 of them away, and lost every single game away from home. So I think something to work on there, possibly, but also a lot to be said for them finally be able to turn Italy into a bit of a fortress, or their home ground advantage into somewhere that they can win games, which is a good base to work off, I think. But I felt like the Welsh had this coming a little bit. I think they were slowly but surely building up to it. And I think Italy can be forgiven for, after managing to get across the line against England, just maybe having a little bit of the wind out of the sails in terms of...
There wasn't much they could achieve this round.
No.
I don't even know if they could have caught Scotland. I don't believe so. I think even with a bonus point, they wouldn't have gotten them. So, yeah.
But I think it does wonders for Welsh rugby. I think the mood in the stadium was almost like it was euphoric.
It was.
Which
they also played with a swagger.
Yeah,
the
definitely.
Welsh. Edwards playing really well.
Yeah, and
that long drop goal was something to see.
And I think quite astute from the head of the Welsh Rugby Union. I don't know what his name is, but he was quite present and gave a couple of interviews, and spoke about as well as standing there and at least fronting up to all the criticism around, reducing the amount of teams that they're going to have in the ULC, but simply just saying we cannot give 4 teams the structures that they need to compete, and we have the goal of being top 5 in the world as Welsh Rugby, and we have to focus more on getting structures right and making the pipelines as good as possible, and we can't build 4 pipelines. We can only afford to run 3. So I find that was quite fitting to be able to come out and front up and say, hey, and stand by your decision, and then obviously very astute that it was right after a victory.
Do you think it was ever about them reducing a team, or was it more about which team they were cutting? Because I feel like that's where most of the heats come. Looking at the decision from an outside perspective, I would say 100% the correct way to do it. You're not big enough of a union, and there's not enough players in your country to fill 4 teams.
Yeah, I think it was a combination though, but because I think any set of fans would have been aggrieved if it was their union that was going to go. So I think you're inevitably going to get criticism, and I think the big glaring thing is you go, well, why were you able to do that for the past how many decades, and why has it stopped now? So I think there was this little bit of an angle of, well, you've mismanaged things, which I think they have. You've mismanaged funds, and now you're trying to push the blame onto we can't compete, but why can't you compete? What have you done in those pipelines, and how have you mismanaged money and mismanaged structures in order to get us here? That is, I think, the critical lens that they're seeing it through.
It's a bit of an unfair take, though, because the landscape is constantly changing, and even if you look over at the Premiership, I mean, they've lost a whole bunch of teams. South Africa, we've taken with the EP Elephants out
Currie Cup's absolutely fallen apart.
No, 100%.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm just looking at it
I
from
know,
a
no,
Welsh perspective,
I'm
and
just
I think,
saying,
and particularly if you were a Scarlets fan, you're going to be pretty aggrieved.
Yeah. No,
Or Ospreys. Was it Ospreys? Scarlets. Ospreys.
Ospreys.
Sorry, Ospreys.
Yeah.
If you're an Ospreys fan, you're going to be pretty aggrieved.
Yeah. Anything else on the Italy versus Wales game? Any players that stood out for you from an Italian point of view throughout the tournament? I think Lionel had a good game. Menoncello, obviously, we spoke about. Brex. Yeah, I think there's a few Italians you can probably name who had a good tournament. Now, it'll be interesting to see how they go back into the URC, because we're going to get into that a little bit later, but it's getting tight as things progress there.
It's also going to be interesting to see how these teams then play against the Southern Hemisphere when the Nations Cup sort of really gets underway.
Right. Biggest game of the weekend. France needed to draw to win the Six Nations. And they did just a little bit more than that. They beat England 48-46 with a 82nd minute penalty by Thomas Ramos. I don't know. Where do we start on this game? Because there's so much to dissect.
First of all, the scoreline is just ludicrous. I think if you then throw into that 4 tries by BB, insane. Three of them almost identical as well. Well, 2 of them with a grubber, 1 with a kick over the top, and then the other just to sort of overlap. So just all these superlatives happening in the game. I think it's definitely a sign of what England tried to do. I think Borthwick said, "Listen, guys, we're going to go out swinging. That's what we're going to do."
Yeah.
And I think the French just stuck to their guns, I think, in the sense that they knew that probably sort of pound for pound, they would probably get it across the line, even if the English side did show up. But for them to go out and let 46 points, and it's the most points England have scored ever, I think, in France.
Wow.
So, quite a crazy way to crown off the tournament.
It's a brilliant product if this is what you are watching for the first time and starting to get into rugby. If you see a game like this, you go like, oh shit, this is pretty entertaining.
Yeah.
We can talk about things like Ollie Chessum and Pollock running around like football players, shushing the crowd and all of their antics. I've actually come around on stuff like that. I think with the new sort of viewership coming in, or the new spectators that are coming in, it's maybe something that's going to be more on par with what they like to see and feel entertained by. So, by all means, become that pantomime villain. It's just going to make for a good story.
I think one has to footnote that with anything that a player does, which in any way resembles any kind of flair, Klaus immediately stamps as is like a football player.
But I will have to add to that particular instance.
Which one? The Chessum one or the Chessum try?
The Chessum try and the Pollock thing were 2 different things, because I think that was Freeman.
Yeah,
maybe
I think so. Yeah.
Somebody else. Yeah. The Chessum thing. The thing that I just need to note is celebrate your tries, but dude, you need to score under the post. There's nobody really to your right, and you have got a kicker who is. I don't know what his kicking rate was, but it wasn't 100%.
I think he'd missed 2 at that point. Listen, I mean, first of all, fair to him for fucking slotting that drop ball after the ball fell off the tee. That was the most nonchalant thing I've ever seen.
Yeah. And also fair play to Chessum for making that intercept. That was...
Listen, absolutely. But there was absolutely no reason why he didn't run into the post. He had so much space and time.
And when you've got a game like this where it's literally just tit for tat the entire way through, you have to make sure you're getting every single point.
Is that just... inexperience in those big moments of sort of understanding, listen, it's exciting and it's all overwhelming you and it's the adrenaline is rushing through your body, but you still have to make that wise decision of what to do when.
I'm basing this off of how I felt during high school sports. So I think I can only...
I would have run into the corner flag.
I can only assume it's just like you're so excited by the moment you forget about the bigger picture.
That's a long way for a flanker to go as well, I think. But I must say, I found... I'm not. I understand the appeal of a Pollock for the sport to a certain degree, but what he did, silencing the crowd after having 0 game involvements and like just coming on, was stupid.
But that's,
like,
that's just what he does.
No, I know, but but we can still call it stupid.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, I just think. I think if you look at the greater context, it's just silly.
Well, I mean, Klaus and I were discussing this before off air, and you know, I spoke about last week how England maybe were missing that sort of little bit of humility. And I don't mind, because Klaus said, listen, maybe it's good for them to be the pantomime villain because that's a role that they can actually thrive in.
Sure.
And I fully agree with that. But I think inward facing and what happens behind closed doors on the training pitch, they probably need an attitude adjustment, because I do think that they probably must sit on some sort of high horse, because something's missing here. You don't go into the tournament as co-favorites and almost end up dead last.
Yeah.
I mean, the Welsh, they didn't overtake them, and there's no ifs and buts and coconuts, but the English had the most humbling tournament of all.
Yeah, Itoje's comments were interesting because he came out pretty hard after the game and very convincingly saying, I'm super, super sold on where this team is going. And it didn't, sometimes you feel like players go through the motions when they're speaking, in press conferences afterwards or in interviews, because they've all been media trained, but it felt a little bit deeper. So there is a deep convincing element to, at least within them, they believe they're going in the right direction. I also saw some of the footage of him speaking to the players after the tournament. They were obviously all very deflated, but this, at least they showed up. And you can't, because I think that would have been imagine they would have gotten smashed.
Yeah, absolutely. No, they have to rock up.
But I do agree what you've noted, and I think that's the thing, is they have to understand what their driving force is. What is our incentive? What is the incentive they place on their own shoulders to get the best performances? And we've spoken about it. We've looked at the way Rassie Erasmus frames it, for example, as to how he gets the best out of his players, and I think that is key to understanding your team and getting the best out of them. I think Farrell's unlocked a togetherness in the Irish team again after struggling and in the beginning of the Six Nations. So that is a key component. And how do you motivate these players? And it has to be intrinsic.
Yeah.
But how do you create that intrinsic motivation?
Yeah, it's tough.
And
the English are already the pantomime villains, right? I think everyone was super happy with how these Six Nations turns out, just because the English sort of struggled. I think almost everyone enjoyed their tournament except for the English.
That being said, I think at the end everybody was hoping the English could win.
Yeah.
Just so that the French
don't you think
didn't,
there's surely there's even some voices or some thoughts inside that England camp that think, we can be the pantomime villain, but let's not unnecessarily make the target on our back bigger than it needs to be.
I get that, but I get the whole pantomime villain thing, and I think if the outside narrative, as you said, if the outside narrative is that, I think that you can get away with owning it as your key driver. But England, how do you box that? How do you package that differently? Because England can't go away to Italy and be the pantomime villain to try and beat Italy. You know what I mean?
No, you just have to get things done.
That you have to get the job done, and I think that's the key. It's the nuances, because they can't be the pantomime villain for everyone. And I think again that's where Rassie does get it right. I think Galtier gets it right as well. He unlocks things in the side to get them across the line.
But where's the fine line then between someone like Henry Pollock and who else was that? Was it Henry Slade and all of them doing that TikTok dance after they beat New Zealand?
Yeah,
something which will attract a new fan base to the game because it's players showing a little bit of themselves and what they go through, and a team just sort of not fitting into classic rugby values of just saying, listen, get your head down, get a win, and then afterwards celebrate. Where's that line? Or do we just say, listen, let the English attract new crowds and let them dance on TikTok, and we'll just go about our own thing and win?
I've already said it. I'm all for it. Just keep on doing your thing, and
you're fully with Mario Itoje. You love where this team's going.
I love where this team's going. It's straight into the dumps. No, I'm joking. But no, quite honestly, it's if they do manage to make themselves the pantomime villain, which in many sort of opposing fans' eyes they are. Yeah. Then they need to learn how to deal with it and really sort of turn that into a positive for themselves. It's kind of like South Africa loves to be the underdog.
Yeah.
We love telling ourselves we've got no chance in this, and then we've got our backs up against the wall. Even if it's we've made up this persona of like, oh no, we're not as good as everybody thinks we are. And they're like, oh look, we proved you wrong. And it's, that's kind of what we thrive on. So if they can use it as positive, and they can use sort of the likes of a Pollock to do that, then good for them. And I think what will happen on field is, I mean, you've seen Afrikaans boys in South Africa talk about it. But they want to just hit the guy, right?
But I think we're part of this problem. We've hyped up Pollock too much from his Northampton thing, because he's a non-event for England. He doesn't play
so far.
And I think like we've fallen foul to this. We've just we pick up on the hype because people like to pick on him, but like he's not in. He's nowhere near the starting team, and he's not even adding any impetus off the bench.
Okay, fine, but then I'll step away from Pollock. The fact is, the English had 8 yellow cards in the Six Nations. 8 yellow cards in 5 games of rugby. Tell me what you want. At the moment, the Pantomime Willem situation, not Willem, because that's an Afrikaans man's name, Pantomime Willem, is obviously just also leading to ill discipline.
Yeah, so it's just not working right now.
So I think that's enough of a summation. I don't know if you still wanted to talk about something in this game.
We do, yes.
Okay.
There's a few things.
Okay. Well, because we're still talking about the general game, what I loved about the scoreline is that there's this big sort of weird thing in rugby now with particularly the Super Rugby teams trying to change and take scrums out, that there's this like thing about, oh, well, it's either we have scrums or the game is exciting.
Yeah.
And I think this is a perfect example of this rugby was extremely entertaining. It was super high scoring, and it was not in spite of the scrums.
Yeah.
The scrums were still well contested. There were key moments where scrums decided momentum.
Yeah.
So I think if you're in New Zealand and Australia thinking that we should get rid of scrums, watch this game back.
Even mauls and lineouts is something that they're like, oh, we don't want as much mauling, and like some of the best tries were scored through mauls.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Some controversy, and I guess there'll always be when the game is this tight, just because a game can swing either way on a ref's decision. There was a big one that was mentioned, I believe, by Borthwick afterwards as well. It was the ref adjudged a French player to deliberately knock on the ball. The TMO got in his ear, I believe, and said it's not a deliberate knock-on. It's just a knock-on, changing it from a penalty to a free kick, or long-arm penalty to a short-arm penalty. He did, I believe, shout advantage over, but the English players didn't all hear him and were still under the impression that they had a penalty advantage. So Finn Smith kicked it through, Grubber kicked it through. The French caught it and scored a try the other way. The English were a bit confused as to why their advantage was over. So I can understand how a few decisions in this game probably feel like they went against the English. And without saying that it always happens in France and whatever, I think the home team does sort of get probably a bit of the rub of the green, just because the crowd does probably play a role as well.
But I also think it's a volume situation. I think that French crowd is so loud.
Yeah.
And I do think they just didn't hear the ref.
Yeah.
And then I say credit to the French fans, because they did not stop for those full 80 minutes of rugby. Have you guys seen the situation at the end yet?
Yeah.
A slow-mo of it? Because it took a long time for any replay to emerge of what happened there with the supposed high tackle.
But I thought it was a few. I didn't think it was the tackle there. I thought it was a few phases before.
That's what I'm saying.
Because the tackle that he made didn't look high at all.
I looked pretty long. I looked
exactly.
pretty long and hard, or waited pretty long and hard on that evening, and I did not see a replay. For me, that was conclusive.
Yeah,
and the confusion afterwards as well as to where the mark was and all of that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a conspiracy theorist when it comes to sports, so I'm not going to get into that. But it wasn't a good look. I feel like in a crucial moment like that, I think the TMO's got to be in his ear personally.
This is the thing with, I mean, the All Blacks are the ones who brought it up first. What is the role of the TMO in the sport? You know, he's obviously got the benefit of he's rewatching the game, sort of almost with like a 10-second delay. With a microscope and a lot of zoom and slow-mo, and can correct the referee as he's going. But the deliberate knock-on decision was one where sort of the England players didn't know or what he was referring, or that the decision had changed, and this high tackle, seemingly the fans didn't know what that high tackle was referring to, just because it seemed like the TMO had given it for something that happened a little bit prior. So.
But truly, if a decision sort of mid-game just changes like that, then the ref must just take the penalty. So if it's a knock on or if it's a deliberate knock on, if it's a deliberate knock on and you said, okay, it was a deliberate knock on penalty advantage, then they can play on. And if it then changes, then you say, okay, sorry, it wasn't a deliberate knock on. We go back for the scrum. But to then let it play out like that,
it's tough.
Just doesn't make any sense for me.
It's an interesting one. They definitely have to look at it, World Rugby, because it's something new that's developed now. Sort of the TMO getting in the ref's ear, the ref trying to communicate with an entire team who's under the impression that something else is happening.
Because I actually thought he had a good game as well, the ref. So I think it's just that last moment of chaos also just didn't really cross the T's and dot the I's on his performance. But I felt he managed the game relatively well. And I think both teams, the French side and the English side, very, very heavy on talking.
Yeah.
They were in his ear constantly. I think particularly the English team, but the French team as well. They have a lot of leaders in there. Dupont was in his ear constantly as well, and so was Itoje. So not the easiest game to navigate.
No.
Nikita, I think that was sort of what his name was, right? I think he's had a couple of struggles in these bigger games, and I wonder if he's maybe just not quite ready for it.
Yeah, but I mean, I think I don't want to harp on referees because I do think they have a very tough job. But you look at the landscape of refereeing now, and you sort of think sometimes they maybe get let down by World Rugby because there is a lot of rule changes tournament to tournament, year to year, and they're sort of learning on the job. And there's a lot of pressure on them, or a lot of focus on them in these big games. So it's tough, you know.
But you've hit the nail on the head. It's the question is, what is the TMO there to do? Yeah. And I think unfortunately, you get it in football, but you get it in rugby as well. There's this weird obsession with protecting the referee's decision, right? But you have also got steps to help make sure they get the decision right. So sometimes I almost feel like they would prefer to kind of leave the power to the ref because that somehow legitimizes the referee, but you're paying dudes to sit and dissect stuff so they don't get it wrong. I agree, that's where the kind of gray zone is.
And I mean, rugby is way ahead of football.
Because if I'm the TMO and I'm watching the referee argue and then the players argue with each other where the mark is, I get straight onto that screen and I look at where the two marks are and I'm in the referee and I say, hey, listen, take a second. This is where the two marks are for the two incidents you're referring to. And then, because then I think there's no room for them to argue. What are the players going to argue about then?
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
This is where you get lasers in, and then it shines the point onto the field.
You go to the AFCON, there's a lot of lasers there when there's Oaks taking penalties. Let's give the French their flowers, though. You know, I think I do believe they need credit. They didn't win the Grand Slam, I think, which they thought maybe coming into this, and they definitely had their struggles. But I think there's definitely some players we have to highlight from this team and this performance. BLBRA, I think nothing that hasn't been said about him before. He's unreal, and some of those tries, he was also chasing down the Thomas Ramos penalty in the last minute in case it bounced off the poles, which very much reminded me of Cheslin Colby, chasing lost causes, and he seems like almost a carbon copy of that sort of
mindset, at least.
Chasing a lost cause, because some of the tries he also scored are some that others might have given up on.
Yeah, I think the looming crazy factor in the whole French tournament is that Dupont had a pretty quiet tournament by his very lofty standards. Yeah. And that's terrifying because I think if he clicks into what he was prior to 2023 before he got injured, before in that final, and then I think he tore his ACL, right? I think it was that took him out for a while he was out for 9 months. Anyway, his big injury.
I don't remember.
Well, he had a big injury and then he was out for quite a length of time. If he returns to that form and you start to see, I mean, Jalibert had moments as well. Ramos heads and shoulders above every other fullback, I would argue, and kicker in World Rugby at the moment. It's phenomenal, and I think that's the sort of, this is not the finished product yet. And if Galtier can get them there, then they're going to be pretty formidable. Because there's other guys there as well. Atasogbe, who is very clearly overshadowed by Biabire, but he's also just such a good winger.
Difficult for Pinot to get back into this team now.
Yeah,
I don't see him coming back.
Yeah.
Like unless there's injuries that causes them to have to sort of look at the great squad.
Yeah.
I think with Atasogbe and with Louis BB, they just play. They just leaps and bounds ahead, as Dominic's already rightly said. But also the way that they've reshuffled their forward pack into having more, let's be honest, open side flankers rather than an extra lock, has just given them so much pace, and they've worked so hard on their aerial battle that they're kicking those contestable kicks and being able to maintain them or at least disrupt it on the receiving end and then sort of capitalize on that. So very much going to be interesting to see them then go and do that further away from home, i.e. in
they're
New
not going
Zealand.
to. That's the simple question.
Well,
Simple answer to
they
it.
will, just maybe not with this direct team.
Yeah.
And they will eventually go with for the World Cup. So it's going to be interesting to see how they perform then, because for all of these teams, yes, you're playing away from home, but the travel is not very far. You're able to go back.
Yeah.
When you then have to travel halfway across the world,
This is
it
what I
all
said.
becomes a lot more complicated.
It's a chance that they seem to completely ignore year in, year out. I said let's give them their flowers. Let's not give them too many flowers.
Well,
2 weeks ago, we were sitting here criticizing them for the loss against Scotland. They did let a pretty weak English team into this game.
I had to smirk when at the end of the game because one of the first guys they interviewed, because he's
smoke.
no smoke.
Oh,
No,
smoke.
I don't smoke.
Smoke.
It's bad.
I also understood
I was like,
smoke.
what did you light a cigar?
But if there are any vape or tobacco companies that want to sponsor this podcast, I can.
We're not above any of that.
No, I had to smirk because the first thing they did was smirk.
Dude, you said it 3 times.
What do you
now,
want me
mate.
to say? Smirk, smirk or what?
Let's just leave
It
it.
says, are you deaf?
Let's leave it.
I had to
Smile.
smirk. Anyway, yes, you guys are such morons.
Just keep going. Just keep going.
dude.
Because they interviewed the defense coach of the French after the game, and he was smiling ear to ear. They just whacked 46 points to England, and he's like, "Oh no, I thought our performance was really great." And I was like, "Bro, you cannot be taking yourself seriously."
I think they conceded what? They conceded 96 points between Scotland and England.
So I think there are some
That's scary.
There are
That
some
is an
very
open
clear
defense.
There are some very clear sort of points that they might have to work on there. Ironically, I think there's a lot of potential in their scrum as well. I think they have the power there to definitely be a bit more of a force.
Maybe that's just their new philosophy. We just need to outscore
I think that's
whatever
it, eh?
the opposition
Let's
can score
just
against
outscore
us.
your opponent. Okay. Let's wrap up the Six Nations. We're all happy with how the tournament turned out. I think we all sort of held on for like a Scottish victory at the end, just because they are the underdog and we do have a soft spot for them.
The one thing I will say about, I have this feeling I'm none the wiser as to where all these teams really stand going into what'll be a World Cup year next year.
I think the new setup of the Nation Series might give us
might settle
a little
that,
bit of an insight. There's some cracking games
Yeah.
in July, where international rugby is gone now, and we've got the URC and the European competitions to look forward to, which I think will be a nice sort of shift back into things, especially the European Cups with the quarterfinals coming up. But just looking at the fixtures for the Nation Series, there's some humdingers in there for some of the big teams we talked about. France are going back to New Zealand this year, and they have already said openly that they are prioritizing their local top 14, and the team being sent down there will consist of players that aren't currently under contract, or not under contract, but aren't currently bound to their teams, to their local teams. So
That'd be a bit of a nice soft start for Dave Rennie there.
yeah, he needs it. Australia facing Ireland in the first week, also a cracker of a game for both teams.
I think Ireland's an interesting. Looking forward, Ireland's an interesting one because he has found a couple of new guys like your McCluskeys of the world, but now it's going to be interesting to see how he persists, if he really continues to venture out or not, because for example he brought Bandi Aki straight back into the fold after his suspension, which I find very strange, but yeah, that's going to be very interesting.
Yeah,
I think Banyaki is also an experienced player that they're using maybe more so for sort of training purposes rather than having them there for actual game
Good
time.
around the squad.
Exactly. Good for vibes.
Well,
you know.
yes,
for the
but
vibes.
having said that, he still brought him on against what was pretty an important game in Scotland. So, and that's essentially you're saying that he's the second best option at 12 in Ireland, which is, debatable.
That's actually quite a difficult game for Australia.
That is a difficult game for Australia. And I'm just looking at the next game for them, which is against France.
Nice opportunity.
And that is a big opportunity because a second string or third string French team is still a strong French team. Shouldn't be underestimated.
No better way to test the 15 rugby league players you've just decided to contract.
And in their last game, they play Italy, and that's no rollover either.
Nope.
So Australia really coming in for some big games. I think if we look at the rest of it, obviously South Africa, England is a big one. Maro Itoje will have a chance to show the world where this team is heading.
I'm very, very chuffed with those fixtures for South Africa.
Yeah.
Because I think it's a good mix of the unknowns in England because they just are underperforming.
God, I'll have to eat my words if they beat us.
They're not going to beat us. They are not going to beat us.
No, they're not.
But I'm just saying, I think I like that. I'm glad we did not draw France because I just don't think we gain anything from it. And
we're playing them later in the year again in Paris.
Yeah,
so.
But at least
against
they'll
their
play
first team.
though.
Yeah, that's true.
That's what I mean.
Oh, yeah,
so
absolutely.
from that perspective, I think we've fallen on the favorable side, I would say.
I'm actually, like you said, it's a good draw for the Springboks because I actually haven't minded the playing the minnows in the July Test series, sort of blooding a lot of young players and then having those big end of year fixtures, which has been the case, I think, for the last 2 years.
And it will with this year with the 4 games against the All Blacks. I think these games even more so. You'll look at Rassie looking like going, okay, well, and time's ticking. These are the last sort of opportunities to give guys that are in and around those squads the opportunity to put their hands up.
And before I get crucified in the comments, I'm by no means calling Scotland and Wales minnows. It's just England I'm calling minnows.
Nice to give this young budding rugby nation a chance.
Well, Maro Itoje has a lot to prove now. I didn't hear that interview afterwards, but now you've gotten me. Now I'm on his case.
Italy had, by all means, a pretty successful Six Nations.
Yeah.
First win against England. They play against Japan,
New Zealand,
and Australia. How do you think they're going to fare against those 3 teams?
I think they need to beat Japan convincingly.
Yeah, it's time now to take that step.
Yeah, and that's difficult because it's away from home for them.
Yeah,
so I think that's if they can do that, and then maybe run Australia semi-close, maybe even beat them. But I think that might be a step too far for them for a team that struggles away from home. I think if they can win one of those 2 between Japan and Australia, I think that's a good series
outing
for them. Yeah.
Interesting that obviously no country is going to play Fiji, but I see Fiji play all their games essentially away.
Yeah.
Because they play in Cardiff, Liverpool, and Edinburgh.
Yeah, I think it's also for the nation series to work with the way that travel has to be done. I think it's impossible.
And I think half the Fijian team probably, or even more, based in Europe anyway.
Yeah,
so.
It's a pity. I think I don't know when last international rugby was it.
They played the game that they had against Scotland towards the end of last year.
Yes,
was played in Fiji.
Yeah, you'd love to see more games there, but I think just logistically, it's probably quite difficult.
Sea levels, bro.
All right. I think that's enough for the international rugby window. We're just quickly going to touch on our new favorite competition, which is the URC. Go through some games from the weekend and then look at the log as it stands. Or actually, let's look at the log beforehand, just so that we know who's who in the zoo here. How many rounds are there in the URC? Does everyone play
16.
each other? 16. So we're getting to the business end of the competition now, especially when it comes to the top 8. So currently in the top 8, we've got Glasgow, Stormers, Ulster, Leinster, Cardiff, Munster, the Lions, and the Bulls. Sorry, when I saw the Lions, it's the Fidelity Security Lions, but...
Secure Drive.
Secure Drive Lions. From a South African
They could have made that a bit longer, in my
view,
opinion. But
great
FSC.
to see 3 teams in the top 8.
and also the Sharks not too far off, and definitely with the potential to get in there.
Yeah.
Obviously at someone else's expense, and it could ultimately be one of the other South African teams' expense.
Yeah, but you would argue that, especially the Lions, are in a fine run of form,
Yeah.
which they will have to continue. So let's look at the fixtures for this week to see who's playing who. Starting off the weekend with the Bulls at home to Cardiff.
Yeah, the Bulls are in a weird space at the moment. I think they're still very much suffering under first season syndrome under Ackermann.
Yeah.
I think he came in there very hopeful, and I think rightfully so. I think long term you'll see him yield, but a lot of new players, obviously a lot of new ideas. That's going to be a tough game, I think.
Yeah.
I think Cardiff isn't going to yet have their
True.
internationals
True.
back, so I think it's going to be a bit of a weaker Cardiff side that
I
they'll
have
play against.
it's definitely not like the most out of the box thing anyone's ever said, but I think Cardiff might have a fall from grace now. I think they're going to struggle towards the end of the season just because I think it's been a long season for them, and I do believe that they've been punching above their weight for a while. They sit currently in 5th, and I think things are going to come quick.
Didn't they finish around that sort of area last year?
Yeah.
You can say that. I cannot correct you
No,
because I don't know.
they definitely
I'm pretty
quantified.
sure they
yeah.
finished
I think
like
they finished 5th or 6th
sixth or
there.
something.
It doesn't change my statement.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm sticking with it.
I'm just trying to understand the basis of where it's come from.
I make most of my predictions from a
feeling deep
feeling
inside.
based on very little knowledge. I just feel that Cardiff are going to drop off.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is what you tune in for. Maxi's feeling.
Okay, bottom of the table clash is Scarlets versus Zebre, sort of two teams who have nothing to play for.
Yeah. Nice. They must have fun.
Vibes.
Okay. Ulster versus Connacht is a nice one.
That's a very
Very good Irish derby.
Yeah.
You got to go with Ulster.
I think so.
Yeah.
The more
Connacht are
informed team.
just lingering outside the top 8, but I think away to Ulster is probably quite tough these days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next up, it's your team, Fidelity Secure Drive.
If the Lions want to make the top 8, they have to win a game like this.
Yeah.
Edinburgh traveling.
Edinburgh 12th. They're not the team that they were last year.
I assume that they also will not have all their Scottish players back, or at least, yeah.
And the South African players have all basically been on holiday for the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Those derbies at home were tough, bro.
Yeah, they were tough, but I mean, it seems like it's all splotted and in a little bit in between.
Yeah.
No, that definitely should be a game that FSD Lions secures. See what I did there?
Very nice.
Okay. A very big game in Durban is the Sharks against Munster.
We're getting to last chance saloon territory here for the Sharks to get anything out of this, because they've had some really good performances. JP Peterson showed promise. Now you might as well get good old Plumtree back there with some of the displays. So
He's currently working on a culture there. Though. They're first trying to find a culture, then they'll win rugby games.
if I'm the Sharks, I'm hoping and praying that the Irish are still in Dublin, because
Celebrating their second place.
yeah.
It's going to be a tough one.
I think it's a tough one.
Munster travels really well.
They love South Africa.
Yeah.
Jeez.
This is a big problem.
all those influencers in Cape Town currently, they're
exactly.
way too comfortable down there.
Geez, I'd take Irish influences over German influences in Cape Town.
Benetton versus Ospreys.
Nice little.
Ospreys are also sort of on the verge.
Yeah, this is there.
Just sitting off the top.
This is literally their
top
last
8.
chance saloon.
Yeah.
But yeah, Benetton also need to, if they want to kick on now, I think they're going to have to start getting results.
And I think the game of the weekend is Glasgow versus Leinster.
Yeah.
I think it also depends who's available and who's playing. But
I would argue that probably both teams are equally impacted by that, though, with their internationals leaving. So
how long do they get? Do they all just take a week off or what?
No, I think they're ingested back into the squad quite quickly. But I just think it's a it's a minute managing situation. Right. So I think their fitness is assessed, and then after that they bleed them back into the squads.
Yeah,
I'm sure Oaks are pretty bruised and battered from Six Nation test matches.
Glasgow are 4th, Leinster are 1st, separated by 4 points. I think anybody could take that.
Yeah.
Hard to predict.
Yeah, at home for Glasgow. So
A Sunday game for the Stormers.
Sunday game for the Stormers at home to Dragons. It was a big win for them against the Bulls on the weekend.
Yeah.
After, I think, having lost 3 or 4 in a row.
3 in a row.
3 in a row. So it seems like they're back on track. They'll definitely have to put in a very good performance against Dragons. Wouldn't be surprised if there's a few squad rotations again just to get them back into the swing of things, because after this, we have one more round of URC fixtures before it's the quarterfinals of the European Championships. So I think that's something that both the Bulls and the Stormers will have one eye on, because they have two tough away fixtures.
Let's be honest. The Stormers, if you're Dobson, you're looking at this game, you're like, it's bonus point, dispatch them territory.
Yeah,
because
but it might also just be like rest a lot of players so no one gets injured.
Yeah, but there's also a couple of candidates in that Stormers side, like Willemse really needs minutes.
Yeah.
So I think it's a unique balancing act. But
Willemse fucking gets injured for 3 months.
But we spoke about this though. This is the thing that South African teams have to get better at. Exactly what we've identified now is like, which ones do you prioritize? We're calling for them finally showing up in the European competition, but at the same time, I can totally understand if they're like, well, we want to try and secure home fixtures as long into the tournament as possible.
Yeah.
And if you're looking at the Dragons, and they are there for the taking.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're all in agreement that the Stormers will take this. But which team will rock up? How many points will they win by? Who gets injured?
And ironically,
those are the things no one knows.
And ironically, a weird way of someone like Sasha to play his way back into form, because he has been struggling.
He played very well against the Bulls.
Yeah, he had a better game. Yeah, better game.
Listen, no one goes to Loftus. Other than the Stormers.
I've been to Loftus a couple of times, actually.
All right. I think that wraps it up for this week. Great Six Nations tournament. We're going to be doing some club rugby from here on out. We look forward to seeing you again next week. Leave us some comments on our YouTube video and on our socials. Just remember, all is said in jest.
Yeah. I think I'm quite funny, actually.
Dominic does not believe that the Republic of Ireland is owned by a British royal.
I do not believe that. It was a joke.
We have great respect for all of the nations playing rugby.
Yeah.
We're just fans of South Africa more. All right.
On that note,
Thanks for tuning in.
goodbye.
Bye.